After a month of icy silence with Ethan, the affluent scion, some bombshell news suddenly hit our friend circle. He'd popped the question, and she said yes. Journalists quickly swarmed me to offer their congratulations. At that point, I had just wrapped up a brutal tour and was completely wiped out. Standing before the cameras, I kept a cool smile. Ethan's engagement has zilch to do with me, I calmly stated. I genuinely hope he finds happiness with his engagement. The second my statement went live on TV, Ethan smashed the glass in his grip. Blood gushed from his hand instantly. After my final tour show, I headed backstage to grab my phone. The second I powered it on, a barrage of messages flooded in. Mia had proposed to Zoe, and Zoe said yes. After all these years, they finally circled back. Is it really done between you and Ethan? I held my phone tightly and plopped onto the couch, feeling utterly drained. It had been a month since Ethan and I began our silent feud. Before, I was always the one bending over backwards and making peace. But this time, my jam-packed tour itinerary left me no chance to reach out to him. And in just a month, Ethan had asked out his first love, Zoe. I was too drained to respond to those messages. After a quick breather, I had to face the press again. When I stepped out, a swarm of reporters engulfed me. Mics up, firing questions. When did Ethan propose to you? When's the wedding set? Is it going to be overseas or here? Congrats on your engagement to Ethan. Amidst the madness, I felt an odd sense of calm. I stared into the cameras, my eyes blank, and after a beat, I gave a slight grin. Ethan's engagement has nothing to do with me. I repeated, let me use this moment to sincerely wish him well. The second my words were broadcast, Ethan shattered the wine glass in his hand. Blood dripped to the ground as Zoe let out a startled shriek. Call a doc! An ambulance! She yelled, clutching his hand with tears in her eyes. Get out! Ethan snapped, coldly yanking his hand away from hers. Ethan! Zoe stammered in shock, her face burning with embarrassment before tears started falling. I said, get out, Ethan growled, his frosty stare sweeping the room. Don't make me say it a third time. Zoe bit her lip, holding back her sobs, as she backed away with the others. Ethan opened his broken palm, blood staining the engagement ring on his left hand. Expressionless, he took off the ring and tossed it in the trash bin. A month later, while prepping for a gig, the company boss called me into his office. The lead dancer spot, which was always mine, was now handed to Ava, who'd never gotten along with me. Then, out of the blue, my landlord dumped me, demanding I move out within 2 days. Ever since breaking up with Ethan, it felt like my luck had nosedived. Nothing was going right. When I was denied the chance to even step on stage, Ethan suddenly rang me up. Lily, you still want to dance? I showed up at the address Ethan gave me. A waiter took me into an elevator and up to a suite. As the door swung open, his voice echoed. As long as she keeps her head down and begs, I wouldn't mind keeping her. She'd be a pretty obedient pet. The moment he finished talking, our eyes locked. His calm demeanor only made my pale face look more ridiculous. Is that you? I asked. He nodded slightly, flicking the cigarette between his fingers. Why? What else? I'm not done playing with you? Ethan chuckled. Lily? Even if we were to break up, it should be on my terms, when I get bored. With no other choice, I bunked at a hotel. The company kept blocking me from performing, but I stubbornly suited up for every show and waited backstage. At first, Ava mocked me, but eventually she couldn't even be bothered. While the others took their bows on stage, I stood in the shadows, wearing my practice clothes and watching numbly. One day after the show, I saw Ava rush off stage and dive into a man's arms. That's when I noticed Ethan had shown up. Ava nestled against him, pouting, while Ethan stroked her cheek and whispered something in her ear. Ava seemed annoyed, but eventually walked away. Ethan approached me. Do you regret it? Look, whoever I choose can climb to the top overnight, he said smugly. But of course my feelings for you are different. If you come back, the lead dancer position is still yours. And if I refuse, I asked, you're engaged now. I, Lily, will not be someone's mistress. Ethan laughed, looking down at me like a brat. Do you really think you can ever dance on stage again? Here or anywhere else? He sneered. Ethan leaned in, hugging me like he used to when we were into each other. I'll give you one night to think about it. Call me tomorrow. Back in school, even the rich kids in the troop nearly drove me into depression. And Ethan, with all his power and clout, was way more dangerous. I knew he had the means to keep me off the stage for good. But the thought of never dancing again felt worse than death. In the dressing room, I drowned my sorrows in 2 bottles of booze. By the time I staggered out, the theater was nearly empty. As I passed the stage, I stopped abruptly. Lucas stood in a sharp black suit, his assistant holding his coat a step behind him. A cigarette burned between his fingers, its ash long forgotten. He stood silently, watching a delicate figure spinning on stage until she collapsed, exhausted, her sobs barely audible. "Wait outside," Lucas said, taking his coat from the assistant. By the time I heard footsteps, he was already standing before me. Tears blurred my vision as I looked up. "Mr. Lucas?" His family and Ethan's weren't exactly tight. Lucas and Ethan had no private dealings, though they kept it civil at public events. I'd met Lucas once at a party Ethan dragged me to. Ethan had met Lucas once at a party Ethan dragged me to. Ethan always said Lucas was impossible to handle, unmoved by money, power, or beauty. Lucas bent slightly and draped his coat over my shoulders. "What happened? Why are you drinking so much?" I clutched the coat, stood up, and almost shook my head when an idea flashed in my mind. Ethan's power was insurmountable for me, but Lucas's was greater. Why would Lucas go against Ethan for me, though? As I hesitated, Lucas handed me a tissue. "Wipe your tears." I took it but didn't move, letting my tears flow unchecked. "Did you have a fight with Ethan?" "We broke up," I said softly. Lucas raised an eyebrow, watching me without a word. "Do you want me to take you home?" he offered. I didn't refuse. "Where are you staying?" I told him the name of the hotel. "Why a hotel?" "The landlord kicked me out. I'm looking for a new place." Lucas fidgeted with the prayer beads on his wrist. "I have an empty apartment nearby. You can stay there temporarily." I looked up at him, my eyes slightly red. The dim light in the car cast shadows, but he was still strikingly handsome. "Would it trouble you?" "Not at all." Halfway through the ride, I saw Ava's IG post. Exhausting rehearsals and performances, but so fulfilling. "See you at tomorrow's show. Thanks, my dear, for the beautiful flowers." The pic showed a massive bouquet with a card signed simply, E. Expressionless, I closed the app and turned to Lucas. "Mr. Lucas, would you mind taking a photo with me?" "A photo?" he asked, intrigued. I opened my camera and switched to front-facing mode. "Just like this. Could you move a little closer?" Lucas leaned in slightly, his hair brushing my temple. I shifted back and forth until I was almost pressed against his face. Just as I pressed the shutter, Lucas raised his hand and placed it gently on top of my head. "You're really good at this. Who said you're hard to deal with?" I zoomed in to check the pic. A tipsy Lily looked stunning. Lucas still seemed a bit distant, but his incredible looks more than made up for it. And that affectionate head pat from such a mature man, it was totally swoon-worthy. I was stoked. "Can I post this on IG?" Lucas nodded. "Up to you." I quickly put together a post for Instagram. A beautiful, tipsy night. The pics were a few scenic shots and this close-up selfie of us. Moments after I posted it, a notification popped up. "LJ, it's really beautiful." The next second, my DMs blew up. I didn't even have time to check those messages before nervously asking him, "Aren't you worried about people misunderstanding this?" "Misunderstand what? This photo looks pretty intimate. People might overthink it." Lucas suddenly glanced at me. "Afraid Ethan will see it?" I shook my head like a drum. "No, it's not about him. I'm just worried it might cause trouble for you." "It's not trouble." "What?" Lucas didn't respond, but gestured toward my phone. "Maybe you should check those messages." Under that IG post, things had already gone viral. Comment 1. "If I'm not mistaken, the guy next to you is Lucas?" Comment 2. "Did you cast a spell on him? That's Lucas. How could he possibly take a cheek-to-cheek photo and even pat someone's head?" Comment 3. "Using Photoshop to this extent is just unnecessary. You don't need to fake this to one-up me." Ava wrote that one. Reply to Ava, "I had my friend verify this. There's no Photoshop here at all." Comment 4. "Let's be real," he commented on the post immediately. Can this even be fake? My head started to hurt. Lucas's phone seemed to be buzzing nonstop, too. It really felt like I had caused trouble for him. Maybe I should just delete the post? I suggested. Lucas glanced down, his slender fingers lightly rolling the beads on his wrist bracelet. Lily? He said, suddenly calling me by name. I froze and instinctively looked at him. In the dim light of the car interior, I couldn't quite read the emotions in his eyes. I told you, it's fine. His voice was deep and resonant, sending an electric current straight to my heart. There's always an inexplicable magnetic pull between men and women. At that moment, I could feel that Lucas might have feelings for me. People in the industry often described him as reserved, cold, difficult, especially distant with women. For years, I'd never heard of him being involved in any romantic scandals. My heart raced faster. Back in school, when I was bullied, depressed, and suicidal, Ethan saved me. I had truly thought he would be my forever. But now he was engaged to his first love, someone from a matching social class. It was completely over between us. I knew his personality well. Ethan was a man born into privilege, totally spoiled. Now that I had broken up with him, his pride would never let him move past it. If I didn't love dancing so much, if I hadn't been pushed to the edge back then, maybe I could just give up, leave the city, change careers. But to me, dancing was more important than life itself. My fingers trembled slightly. After grabbing my luggage from the hotel, I went to the apartment Lucas had mentioned. He helped carry my suitcase upstairs. At the door, I asked softly, "Would you like to come in for tea?" He placed the suitcase on the rug in the entryway, glanced at his watch, and said, "It's late. Get some rest." I stood there stunned, watching him. He chuckled, brushing a stray lock of hair from my forehead. "Call me tomorrow after you've sobered up." With that, he turned and left. It wasn't until I heard the door lock click that I snapped out of it, feeling utterly embarrassed. It seemed he didn't feel that way about me at all. I had completely overthought it. The next day, I slept until almost noon. My phone was flooded with missed calls and messages. Before I could look through them, another call came in. I accidentally answered it, and Ethan's angry voice boomed through. "Where are you right now? Don't think you can do whatever you want just because I've spoiled you." "Ethan," I opened my mouth, only to realize my throat was terribly hoarse. "What's wrong with your voice? Where are you? Don't tell me you're really with Lucas." "Yes, I'm at his place." I clutched my phone, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtains. "This place is close to the dance company, and I like it? What's that supposed to mean?" "Let me warn you, stop this nonsense and come back while there's still room for reconciliation. When you got engaged to Sophia, you should have realized there was no chance for us anymore. Engagements don't matter. They do. Even if I marry her, I can still give you whatever you want. I don't need anything from you. Lily, you better think this through. I already have." "You think being with Lucas will solve everything?" Ethan sneered. "He and I don't get along. You know exactly what he's after." "That's my business. Don't come crying to me if he uses you and throws you away." Ethan's tone softened. "Come back, and I'll forget all about what happened yesterday. You love dancing. I'll buy the entire theater company for you. From now on, every lead role will be yours. How about that? Save it for Ava." I laughed lightly. "Stop calling me from different numbers. You might not get tired, but I'm exhausted from blocking them all." With that, I hung up and blocked his number again. After washing up, I received a call from the dance company. "Lily, come by today to process your resignation." I wasn't surprised. This was the only leverage Ethan had over me now. "I'll be there soon." Still, after hanging up, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. In my senior year, I had earned a spot in one of the top ballet companies. After just 6 months, I had become the lead dancer. It had taken nearly 20 years of effort to get to where I was today, but losing everything? That only took one person's word. When I arrived, Ava and the others were rehearsing. I stood outside the door, watching in a daze. If I lowered my head now, there might still be a chance to salvage things. But to become someone's mistress? A rich man's pet? My mother would probably jump out of her grave and strangle me. After finishing the resignation paperwork, I left the company, but I couldn't hold it in any longer and broke down crying behind a planter. The director's words had been clear. If I signed the resignation papers, no company or theater would ever hire me again. My phone kept ringing. I didn't want to look at it or answer. After crying my heart out, I carried my suitcase to the roadside to hail a cab. Just then, a message came through. LJ, pick up the phone. Another call came in. Mr. Lucas, is something the matter? Are you outside? I just left the company. My voice still carried traces of sobs. You've been crying? It's nothing. Where are you? I'm by the road, about to get a cab. Don't move. I'll be right there. Mr. Lucas, we'll talk when I see you. He hung up. Lucas. We'll talk when I see you. He arrived quickly. When the car stopped in front of me, I was sitting on the side of the road, dazed, like a homeless kid. His driver took my suitcase and placed it in the trunk. He approached and extended his hand to me. I looked up at him, my eyes swollen from crying. Get in the car first, he said. Instead, I turned away, tears streaming down my face. I don't need your help, I muttered. He hadn't meant for me to misunderstand him, yet his actions left me confused and embarrassed. He didn't say anything, but I heard a soft sigh escape him. Lily, he called my name again. I want to help you. But you turned me down last night, I replied, because I don't see you as just some random girl. I froze, my heart softening inexplicably at his words. Lucas took me to grab some food first. Once my mood had calmed down a bit, he had someone bring me a few documents. Check out the profiles of these dance troupes and theaters, he said. I'm not knowledgeable about dance. You're the expert. Decide where you'd like to go. Of course, I won't pull any strings for you. Whether or not you get in depends on your own ability. My only promise is to ensure absolute fairness in the admissions process. I gripped the papers tightly, a stubborn determination surging within me. I had confidence that as long as the exam was fair, I wouldn't be disappointed with the outcome. Still, the surprise came so suddenly that I struggled to fully believe it. Is this really possible? I asked. There's nothing in this world that's impossible, he replied, as long as you're willing to work for it. Suddenly, I stood up and threw my arms around him. Lucas, thank you. I began practicing furiously, pouring all my spare time into the rehearsal room. The exam date was quickly approaching, and despite my confidence, the pressure felt immense. After all, no matter what, I couldn't let his support go to waste. When Lucas came to pick me up, I had just changed out of my practice gear and was tending to the wounds on my feet. The moment he walked in, I instinctively tried to hide my foot. A dancer's feet are always covered in scars. Ethan had often expressed disdain for my deformed toes and scarred skin. Back then, he would get upset whenever dance interfered with my time with him. In hindsight, I realized that in Ethan's eyes, I was nothing more than a pet. Something that didn't need a career, just a pretty face to please its owner. Are you hurt? Lucas asked, kneeling down and naturally holding my ankle. No, don't look. It's ugly, I said, embarrassed. Lucas glanced up at me, took the cotton swab from my hand and said, I'll take care of it. My big toes were visibly twisted, with 2 nails completely missing. Even I found them unsightly. When he applied iodine to my wounds, I instinctively pulled back. Stay still, it'll be over soon, he said firmly, holding my foot steady as he placed bandages over the cuts. It must hurt, he said softly. I'm used to it, I replied. But when the nails came off, it must have hurt a lot, he continued, his voice low. His eyes filled with pity, looked into mine. I froze, my nose stinging as tears welled up. The moment they began to fall, Lucas wrapped his arms around me. I buried my face in his chest and cried for a long, long time. When I finally stopped, I didn't look up but tightened my grip on his hand. Lucas? I whispered. Stay with me tonight. He didn't answer immediately. After a moment, he tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. Lily, he said, calling my name once more. Look at me and say that again. I had never seen this side of him before. Beneath his usual calm demeanor was an undeniable intensity. His fingers tightened slightly on my chin, making me wince. When I tried to push him away, he suddenly pressed me against the mirrored wall and kissed me deeply. I ended up being carried out of the practice room by Lucas. His shirt was wrinkled, my doing when I clutched at it, struggling to catch my breath during the kiss. I felt a bit self-conscious when I saw the driver, but Lucas remained composed. In the car, I sneaked a glance at him. He noticed, raising a hand to cover my eyes. "Don't stare," he said. "What's the harm?" I muttered under my breath. "If you don't want me to see, don't let it show." He let out a low, amused laugh. In the shifting light of the car, I found myself smiling as well. Lucas always seemed lean and tall, but I hadn't realized how solidly built he was. I poked his abs, my cheeks growing warm. "Not bad," I teased, trying to sound casual, though I was far from calm inside. I'd thought I might resist or feel uncomfortable. But when he emerged from the shower and casually asked me to dry his hair, I found myself unexpectedly at ease. When he bent down to kiss me, he called my name in the most intimate tone. Closing my eyes, I looped my arms softly around his neck. "Lucas," I murmured, "I just remembered, I never asked you something." "What is it?" "There's no record of you having a girlfriend or being engaged. But you won't suddenly spring a fiancé or wedding announcement on me, will you?" "I won't," he said, planting a kiss on my forehead. "Then, if you ever plan to get engaged or married, promise to let me know ahead of time, okay?" "Don't overthink it," he said gently. "Promise me," I insisted. After a moment, he brushed his fingers along my brow and nodded. "Okay." A sense of relief washed over me, but it was followed by an inexplicable sadness. Deep down, I realized I didn't truly want him to agree to that. That night, as he carried me to the bathroom, I clung to him, too tired to even open my eyes. "Lucas," I mumbled. "For the next 3 days, I have to abstain from any distractions. My big exam is coming and I need to conserve my energy." My legs felt weak. I could barely stand, let alone dance. "1 day of rest isn't enough," he teased. I forced my eyes open and glared at him. "No way!" He chuckled, his demeanor relaxed, but I was all too aware of how overwhelming he could be. Back in bed, I touched the prayer beads on his wrist. "You're such a liar," I muttered. "A liar?" he asked, amused. "That bracelet, it's just for show," I said. "When I first met you, I thought you were truly indifferent to worldly desires. Even the most detached people have emotions," he replied. "I still remember how you looked at me that night," I said. "Your gaze was cold, indifferent, like you didn't care. After that one glance, you didn't look at me again all evening." As I spoke, the word slipped out, and I drifted off, my hand still resting on his wrist. That night, Lucas indeed hadn't looked at me a second time. Back then, I was still Ethan's girlfriend. The first time Lucas saw me, his heart stirred faintly, but he refused to covet someone else's partner. Even though Ethan and he were never on good terms, Lucas wouldn't drag an innocent woman into their feud. Women shouldn't be playthings or bargaining chips. They deserved respect and care. And so he restrained himself and didn't look again. Later at the theater, he watched the entire performance, yet I never took the stage. Feeling uneasy, he lingered after the audience dispersed. And then he saw me, alone on the stage, dancing. Until defeated, I crouched down and wept. He couldn't help himself. He walked toward me, step by step, just as he'd hoped. During the exam, I chose the most challenging dance style. An esteemed choreographer had once advised against young dancers selecting the style for competitions or critical exams. Honestly, I was torn. Throughout my dance career, though I'd performed on stage, there was always something missing, a lack of true finesse. But this time was different. Fueled by determination, I pressed forward with unrelenting grit. During practice, I could sense it, that intensity and resolve might just lead to a breakthrough. And sure enough, during the exam, I performed beyond my usual ability. When the music stopped, even the judges applauded. As I stepped off the stage, a girl approached me, her excitement palpable. "You were absolutely incredible." "Thank you. Good luck with your exam too." I felt overjoyed, as though the exhaustion and pressure from days of grueling training had evaporated. After changing out of my costume, Lucas called. I ran forward, into the dazzling sunlight. At that moment, it felt as if invisible chains were completely shattered. The Lily who had once been admired for her hard work, yet envied to the point of exclusion. The Lily who had been bullied so harshly she'd wanted to die. The Lily who coped with depression through self-harm. In that moment, running into the sunlight, she was reborn. I threw myself into Lucas's arms and held him tightly. "Looks like it's time to celebrate early," he said. He caught me effortlessly, smiling softly yet tenderly. "Let's go. Dinner's on me tonight." I had thought the dinner would just be the two of us. But to my surprise, he had invited a crowd. When the waiter opened the private room door, Lucas took my hand. The guests quickly stood and approached us. "Lucas, so this is the famous beauty. No wonder he kept you under wraps. You're stunning." I felt a bit uncomfortable and instinctively glanced at Lucas. This circle was both big and small. Lucas and Ethan had mutual acquaintances. Some of these people had seen me with Ethan. Now seeing me with Lucas, I could only imagine what they'd say behind my back. "Put out your cigarettes," Lucas said. At his words, everyone obediently extinguished their smokes. Only after seating me did Lucas sit down himself, prompting the others to follow suit. Moments later, his assistant hurried into the room. She glanced at me before leaning close to Lucas and whispering, "Mr. Ethan is here. He's downstairs, insisting on coming up." The staff couldn't stop him. I instinctively pressed my lips together. The past few days had been peaceful, and I had almost forgotten the ticking time bomb that was Ethan. "Let him up." "No need to stop him," Lucas said calmly. My hands, resting on my lap, began to sweat. He took my fingers in his, applying a gentle but reassuring pressure. Within minutes, Ethan burst into the room. The stench of alcohol wafted in as he pushed open the door, his gaze locking onto me instantly. "Lily," he called, striding toward me and reaching out. Lucas intercepted, raising a hand to block him, his tone icy. "Ethan, mind your place." "My place?" Ethan sneered, his laugh cold and mocking. "Did you mind yours when you took my woman?" "Your woman?" Lucas shielded me behind him and spoke slowly. "As far as I know, your fiancé's last name is Sophia, the heiress of a certain conglomerate." "And what of it?" Ethan's bloodshot eyes blazed. "Sophia is my fiancée, but Lily is also mine. Whether she's yours isn't up to you to decide." "Lucas, are you really going to go head-to-head with me over this?" Ethan's smirk was disdainful, almost cruel. His gaze drifted past Lucas and landed on me. "She was still a student when she was with me, pure, untouched. There are so many clean girls out there, but you had to covet someone like me." Before he could finish, Lucas grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. Ethan struggled, but Lucas's hand tightened around his throat. Before he could finish, Lucas grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. Ethan struggled, but Lucas's hand tightened around his throat. The veins bulging from Lucas's hand were stark and menacing. His exposed forearm taut with restrained power. Ethan's face rapidly turned an alarming shade of purple. The onlookers hesitated, some attempting to intervene, only to be held back by others. Ethan's eyes were wild, and someone softly urged me, "You should stop him. If this continues, Ethan might—" I exhaled slowly, wiping away my tears. Ethan shook his head desperately, silently begging me, but I stepped forward anyway. Clutching Lucas's sleeve, I pleaded in a trembling voice, "Lucas, let him go. Please don't let this turn into a tragedy." The dinner ended in chaos that night. Ethan had to be carried out by waitstaff. Lucas's mood soured, and he downed several glasses of wine. On the way home, he had the driver pull over. In the back seat, he kissed me with a force that was both aggressive and rough. Several times the pressure was too much, but I bit back the pain without a word. I knew he was upset. Ethan's words had been vile, and everyone had heard them. For someone as proud as Lucas, such humiliation was unbearable. "Lily," he suddenly said, gripping my chin and forcing me to look at him. "Did you feel sorry for him?" I was confused. "What are you talking about?" I said, "when I was choking him? Were you worried about him?" I shook my head frantically. No, I just didn't want you to get into trouble because of me." My explanation didn't seem to satisfy him. Lucas's gaze darkened with desire, yet it remained cold. Lucas. He silenced me, his actions growing harsher. Tears streamed down my face from the pain. If you're angry, I choked out. If you think I embarrassed you. I tried to push him away, my voice breaking. Then just leave me? End it. Lily, don't even think about it. He cupped my face again, kissing me fiercely. It hurts, you jerk. I tried to bite him, but he grabbed my waist and pulled me onto his lap. Lucas! I shrieked in panic. He secured me in place, brushing my hair back gently. Lowering his head, he bit my earlobe, his voice hoarse as he whispered, I won't allow you to think about any other man. No one but me. A week later, I started my new job with a different dance troupe. Half a month after that, I joined the cast of a dance drama and landed the role of the third female lead. The performance was a great success, and our troupe hosted a celebratory banquet that same evening with the organizers. Lucas was away on a business trip in the UK, so he couldn't attend the event with me. However, he had his assistant deliver a massive amount of flowers. The area outside the theater was practically transformed into a sea of blossoms. At the banquet, I saw Ethan's fiancée, Sophia. Beside her stood an elegant lady and a remarkably beautiful, gentle young woman. For some reason, though, Sophia seemed a little worn out. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she'd been crying. Miss Lily, Sophia greeted me first. I could only nod and exchange pleasantries. Her gaze traveled down from my face and lingered for a moment at my waist before she turned to the lady beside her with a smile. Look, this is Miss Lily James, a dancer. Isn't she stunning? Such grace, so different from the rest. The elegant woman next to her immediately looked at me, her sharp gaze carrying a subtle air of scrutiny and vigilance. It was unsettling. I recognized her. She was Lucas's mother. So, you're Lily? She asked after sizing me up. Her tone was gentle enough. I nodded. Hello? She didn't respond but gave a slight nod before leaving with the young woman beside her. Sophia chuckled softly. Once they were out of earshot, she turned to me with a faintly mocking tone. Lily, do you think marrying into a wealthy family is easy? With your background, you won't get in, not in this lifetime. I picked up a glass of wine and took a small sip, feeling a vague heaviness in my chest. Did you see that young lady beside her? Emma, she's a socialite from a prestigious family. Sophia continued maliciously. She's the one Lucas's mother picked for an arranged marriage. Sophia cast a meaningful glance at me. And Lucas knows it too. I set down my glass and looked at Sophia. If you have something to say, just say it. I just want to tell you that neither Ethan nor Lucas is someone you can reach. Do yourself a favor and give up this ridiculous fantasy. You don't need to hint at anything, I replied calmly. I've never planned to marry Ethan, and I have no intention of marrying Lucas now. You didn't plan on it, but you keep haunting them, Sophia snapped bitterly. Do you know Ethan is dead, set on breaking off his engagement with me? Because of you? I was genuinely surprised. Sophia was Ethan's first love, different from any of his girlfriends after her. I didn't know, I said. I haven't contacted him since we broke up. It's because you moved on so quickly that he can't let go of you. Sophia's voice broke as tears welled up. Why is it that you can let go so easily, unlike the other women in his life who cling to him obsessively? If you'd held on to him like they did, he would have grown tired of you by now. But you moved on so fast and latched onto Lucas. Now Ethan is even more unwilling to give up, and more determined to win you back. I found it utterly ridiculous. Why is it that a man's infidelity and indecisiveness are blamed on the woman he betrayed? Why is the victim of betrayal expected to weep and cling endlessly? Those who abandon me, why should I hold on to them? Please calm down, I said. I can't calm down, Sophia replied, her eyes filled with helpless despair. For so many years, I've watched him change girlfriends one after another, hoping he'd finally settle down and come back to me. When he proposed, I thought I'd finally waited long enough for that day. But Lily, he did settle down. He learned to be devoted, but not to me. It was to you. It wasn't a surprise that Ethan and I would meet again. But what caught me off guard was how much he had changed. He looked thinner, his clothes were disheveled, and his demeanor carried a sense of desolation. When he saw me coming, he put out his cigarette. It was late autumn, and the weather was bitterly cold. I wrapped my coat tightly around myself as I looked at him. Years ago, it was Ethan who saved me from the edge of a rooftop, where I had sat, dangling my legs, contemplating ending it all. No matter what, there was no irreconcilable hatred between us. Ethan wasn't inherently bad, just spoiled, selfish, and greedy. "I've told Sophia about breaking off the engagement," he said, "and I'm sure you've heard, I haven't had any ambiguous relationships with other women for over half a year. That girl, Ava, I only used her to make you jealous. I never touched her. Come back to me, please." He was wearing the white shirt I had once loved on him. His hair was neatly trimmed, clean, and familiar, yet different. I felt disoriented and sorrowful. Ethan, who was once proud and a little arrogant, the man who looked down on the world, now stood before me, and sorrowful. Ethan, who was once proud and a little arrogant, the man who looked down on the world, now stood before me, careful and hesitant. "Ethan," I said softly, "you have to learn to move forward. Stay with Sophia. Don't hurt another innocent person." "But I don't have feelings for her anymore," Ethan replied, his tone growing desperate. "You're the one I love. It was me who pulled you back from that rooftop," he pressed on. "You said you'd stay by my side for the rest of your life." "Yes, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be alive today," I admitted. "I owe my life to you, and I'll always remember that. I did promise to stay by your side, but I also told you, I will never forgive betrayal. I would rather die than destroy someone else's marriage. I've already broken off the engagement. But Ethan, it's too late. You've fallen in love with Lucas, haven't you? Do you think he can give you what I couldn't? Do you even know his family is harder to marry into than mine? Do you really think he'll stay sincere with you? Emma is already planning her wedding with him, and you're the only one left in the dark." I pushed his hand away and took a step back. "This is my business. Ethan, I know what I'm doing. I know how to move forward and make my choices. Marriage isn't the only path for a woman. What matters so much to you may mean nothing to me. Don't come looking for me again. Live your own life." I turned and walked away. The cold autumn wind cut through me, but it also made me feel more awake. That night, when I got into Lucas's car, I had already made my choice. I knew I was using him, clear-headed yet despicable. I constantly reminded myself not to become reliant on the gifts or shortcuts offered by powerful men, because when they grow tired of you and take away the ladder they built for you, you'll fall, and there will be nothing left of you. It's better to lay each brick of your path with your own hands. It's harder, but at least it's yours, and no one can take it away. Yet, as I stood at the crosswalk waiting for the light to change, I suddenly realized my face was cold and wet. I reached up to touch it. At some point, for reasons I didn't understand, my face had become streaked with silent tears. The night Lucas came back, it snowed lightly, just a little bit. I insisted on going to the airport to pick him up, but I also, vain as I am, wore a thin skirt under my coat. Once I got to the airport lobby, I took off my coat. It wasn't cold anyway with the heating on. From a distance, I saw him. Men who focus on their careers are always the most attractive. He was dressed in a black business suit, followed by a few assistants and a team of senior execs. The sight of this group walking through the airport lobby instantly drew all eyes. Lucas saw me too. He took his coat from his assistant and signaled for them to stay behind. Then he walked towards me alone. "Lucas?" I waved at him. He wasn't one for smiling, and most of the time his face was emotionless. But at that moment when I waved, I clearly saw a glimmer of a smile in his eyes. He wanted to see me, just like in the past half-month. I realized I missed him more than I had expected, just as much as he must have missed me. Lucas draped his coat over me and then looked down at my feet. Since I was wearing a skirt, of course, I had on pretty high heels. As for whether I was cold, that didn't really matter. He led me to the VIP lounge, then went out alone for a while. When he returned, he was holding a paper bag. Inside was a pair of fluffy snow boots. He had even thoughtfully bought me woolen socks. "Change into these. It's really cold outside." I refused. "I don't want to." My skirt and these boots don't match. Lucas knelt down in front of me, coaxing gently. Dancers' feet are very important. Don't freeze them. Oh, so it's not that you care about me? Lily? He seemed a bit helpless. He placed the boots down, then stood up and moved closer to me. I was sitting on a single armchair. He leaned in, his hands resting on the armrests. I was trapped between the back of the chair and his chest, surrounded by his scent. I was still wrapped in his coat and the armrests. I was trapped between the back of the chair and his chest, surrounded by his scent. I was still wrapped in his coat, and the room felt hot. I could feel the sweat on the tip of my nose, and my head began to spin. He lowered his head to kiss me, and just as I was starting to get dazed, I heard him say, "Are you going to change your shoes and go home, or do you want to stay here?" "Home, home," I quickly replied. Lucas kissed me for a while longer before finally letting me go. When we got home, as soon as I walked through the door, I kicked off my boots and wrapped myself around him. "Mr. Lucas?" He remained calm, watching me playfully. "Do you want to try being a dancer?" He leaned against the hallway cabinet, his eyes gradually clouding with desire. "How do you want to try?" I tilted my face up to kiss his chin, my ears flushing, but my words were bold and direct. "Don't you want to see how we dancers practice?" I instantly regretted saying it, but it was probably too late. Lucas, with a face that looked so pure and ascetic, was the most unruly, most mischievous when he was with me in private. My original intention was to tease him back, to get back at him for how he had playfully provoked me at the airport. But now, it felt like handing a pillow to someone who was already falling asleep. In the end, all I could do was soften my voice and plead. "Is this really not okay? I forgot about you being away on a business trip for 2 weeks." It was utterly frustrating, and there was no one in the world dumber than me. This was basically me walking straight into the tiger's mouth like a lamb. 3 days after Lucas returned from his business trip, his fiancée, Emma, suddenly decided to study abroad. She said she planned to settle overseas, and no one mentioned the idea of a marriage alliance between the two families again. I knew this wasn't a coincidence. Sure enough, Lucas's mother soon arranged a private meeting with me. "I'll be blunt with you. I only have one son, and both his father and I take his marriage very seriously. I've looked into your background. You come from a clean family, you're hardworking, and very talented. We don't have any family biases. As long as the girl's background is clean and her character good, we won't oppose. As for the fact that you were in a relationship with that someone before, it doesn't matter. After all, things are different now, and I'm not an old-fashioned person. There's nothing I can't accept. Lucas really likes you, I can tell." She sighed lightly. "You've heard about Emma, haven't you? That marriage alliance was the idea of our elders, and Emma liked Lucas. Lucas rejected her outright when he came back this time. The girl was quite heartbroken, and she won't be coming back after this. Lily, if Lucas truly wants you, we won't object. But we have one request." "What is it?" I already had an idea of what she would say. Undoubtedly, Lucas's mother was a very smart woman. She didn't insult me, ridicule me, or try to bribe me to leave with money. She gave me the initiative, allowed me to choose for myself. She must have already determined some things from her investigation into me, so she was sure of what choice I would make. If you want to be with Lucas, I hope you'll quit your job at the dance company. Also, never return to this line of work. After all, being a dancer requires maintaining a low body fat percentage, which isn't conducive to pregnancy, and it could affect the development of a child. I've seen your medical report, and to be honest, your health indicators are not great. And you've had depression, right? I nodded gently. Yes, but I've been off medication for a long time. Lucas's mother shook her head. I only have one son. I hope you can understand our concerns as parents. This family needs a young heir. I know it's cruel to ask you to give up your dream. If you're willing, I can help you apply for further study abroad, and I'll make sure the financial compensation is satisfactory. Lucas's mother spoke with sincerity. More importantly, there was nothing wrong with what she said. It was hard to feel resentment toward her. To be honest, I've received offers from dance troupes abroad, but I've always turned them down. Now I'll reconsider this matter. You're right. Giving up my dream would be too cruel for me. I looked at her, smiling lightly. I don't know anything other than dancing. Asking me to stop dancing is simply impossible. It seems you've already made your choice. I nodded slightly. I don't need any financial compensation. Lucas has already helped me a lot. Have you thought about it? If you don't want anything, Lucas's mother sighed. How could Lucas ever let you go easily? After meeting with Lucas's mother, I felt uneasy because I had been diagnosed with depression before. I immediately noticed something was off with my body. I went to my previous doctor for medication, but it didn't seem to help much. Then that night's performance went wrong. We were performing the Ballet Notre Dame de Paris. I was playing the lead role of Esmeralda. There were many difficult moves. As I spun to the center of the stage, a sharp pain suddenly shot through my lower abdomen, and my steps faltered. Before I could adjust, I collapsed heavily onto the stage. By the time the ambulance arrived, I was still bleeding heavily. I was rushed straight to the emergency room. The surgery didn't take long. By the time Lucas arrived, I was already hooked up in my hospital room. The moment he pushed open the door, my tears suddenly broke free. The doctor's words were still ringing in my ears. Intense exercise caused the uterine fibroid to rupture, which is why you experience severe abdominal pain and heavy bleeding. It's not what you thought. A miscarriage, your body condition is not suitable for pregnancy right now, and you won't be able to get pregnant. You're too thin, and you've probably taken a lot of hormone-based medications in the past, which has thrown your body's system out of balance. Of course, if you take good care of yourself, it will gradually get better. Lucas took my hand. Don't be afraid. It's all over now. Lucas? I weakly called his name. Hold me tight, please. The day I chose to leave was the same day Lucas was busiest at work. The company's biggest project had reached a critical stage. He couldn't get away at all. I left Lucas a letter. I asked his secretary to make sure he only received it after the project was completed. In the letter, I told him, Lucas, from the very beginning, I was using you. I used you to escape from Ethan, to break free from his control and revenge. I used you to return to the stage, to keep dancing. I'm just a very ordinary, very utilitarian woman. In my life, nothing matters except dance and myself. When I was bullied at school, I grabbed onto Ethan as a lifeline. Then, when Ethan got engaged, I grabbed onto you. I'm really grateful for everything you've done for me, but that's all it is, gratitude. I have nothing to offer you, except myself. Everything I could give you, I've already given. So there's no debt between us. It's all clear now. Ethan had once come to find me overseas. I didn't meet him. At every one of my performances, he sat in the front row. He sent me countless flowers. But every time I would remember that performance in Beijing when Lucas was away on a business trip, he had sent flowers that nearly filled the entire theater. And now we hadn't been in touch for a whole year. Before Ethan returned to the country, he had someone deliver a letter to me. In the past, I really didn't like how you focused only on dance. I mocked how ugly your injured foot looked from dancing. I made fun of your profession thinking it was a lowly one, only meant to please others. I selfishly wanted you to revolve around me, to be mine and mine alone. I arrogantly thought that even after I married, you would still stay by my side. People like us, taking on a few women is no big deal. But when you really left without looking back, I started to get scared. I ruined your dream and couldn't keep you. It's a pity, I realized it too late. When I was reading the letter, someone knocked on my dressing room door. Lily? It was Mia, a colleague from the troupe. Is something wrong? I tucked the letter away and turned to her. Her expression was exaggerated. There's a man here to see you. I thought it was Ethan again. I shook my head and sighed. I don't want to see him. It's not him, she said. My heart skipped a beat. This guy is incredibly handsome. You won't believe it. The moment he showed up, all of us were stunned. Just now, Carrie went up to talk to him right away. My fingers instinctively tightened. Carrie was a stunning blonde with captivating charm. If she wanted a man, she'd always get him. Mia teased. Guess how he reacted? How would I know? I said that. But inwardly, I felt a pang of jealousy. Lucas was easy to approach. Carrie was truly beautiful, and even I thought no one could rival her figure. Mia suddenly burst out laughing. That guy is really well-mannered, but he turned her down right away. She wrapped her arm around my shoulder, her voice full of gossip. Guess how he turned her down? Tell me. He said, "Sorry, I have a girlfriend." Who do you think his girlfriend is? It's not you, is it? No wonder you've turned down Mr. Ethan so many times. How do you keep this so tight? Aren't we best friends? You've been here for a year, and I didn't even know you have such a handsome boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend. Still denying it. Mia puffed up her cheeks and glared at me. Your phone's wallpaper is a picture of the two of you together. I'm not blind, and I'm not stupid. I didn't know how to explain. Everything was true. I was selfish and greedy. I couldn't let go of dance, but I couldn't let go of him either. I didn't want to give up dancing for him, but I secretly kept him in my heart, thinking of him and crying in the countless nights I couldn't sleep. A woman like me deserved to end up alone and lonely. But Lucas. Why did he still come looking for me? I was selfish, heartless. I was fickle and cold-hearted, leaving without a second thought. Lucas never did anything wrong to me, but in the end, how did I treat him? Lily, are you crying? So you still love him, don't you? Go see him. Go meet him downstairs. Mia urged me repeatedly. I wiped away my tears and slowly stood up. When I walked downstairs, I saw him right away. A year had passed. He had become a little thinner, but his features were even more composed, distant. My vision blurred terribly. Lily? Lucas's voice traveled through time, reaching me, and the moment his voice rang out, all my defenses collapsed. Without thinking, I ran toward him, crying uncontrollably with no concern for my image. He opened his arms, just like every time before. He caught me steadily. I held on to him using all my strength. Lucas, take me home. He didn't answer, only gently lifted my face. Just like that night in the rehearsal room. Exactly the same. Lily, look at me, and say it again. I laughed through my tears, but the tears flowed even harder. I looked at him without blinking, just like he asked, and I said loudly again, Lucas, take me home. He rarely smiled, but when he did, his smile was like a balm, healing all of Lily's wounds. He slowly lowered his head, his forehead resting against mine. Still running? I'm not running anymore. Is this the one time you'll stop running? I'll make it up to you. How will you make it up to me? I smiled through my tears, my ears turning red. Well then, Lucas, Mr. Lucas, would you like to try being a dancer again tonight?